Okay, so today we're going over press-ups. We're going to go through a bit of a tutorial, going through general technique tips. We're going to go over how to progress or regress the push-ups to make it easier or harder, and also a few variations on press-ups that we can do. So I'm going to start with just some technique tips that apply to all kinds of push-ups. So every progression, regression, every variation you do, these will help you to get the most out of it. So what I'm going to start with is where we're going to place our hands. So ideally we want our hands to be in line with your chest. So if you think about if you were pushing a car to get the most out of it, you wouldn't have your hands out really wide, you wouldn't have them high up, low down, you'd have them literally right here, you'd be pushing like that. So that's where we're starting. So obviously, onto a real push-up, my hands are roughly in line with my chest, so you can see me, about there. So they're not way out in front of me, they're not way behind me, they're not way out to the side, straight down from my shoulders, in line with my chest. Now, when our hands are on the floor, instead of putting our weight through the palm of our wrist here, because that's just going to put all the weight on one spot, and that's when you can end up with wrist problems, sprained wrist, just general wrist discomfort, which is a common complaint from people who do a lot of push-ups. What we're going to do is try and spread that weight over our fingertips. So what I'm going to do on the floor is, instead of just putting my hand down and pushing through the palm of my hand, I'm actually going to grip, or try and grip the floor with my hands like this, putting the weight through each fingertip and also some through the palm of my hand. Just helps take some of the weight off of that wrist. So I don't know if you'll be able to see the difference here, but the difference between here and here, feel a lot stronger and more comfortable in that position. The next thing I'm going to go over is how we keep our body in line. So you've probably seen people doing push-ups before, where maybe their hips are sagging down like this, maybe the bum's up like this. What we want is a nice straight back. The best way to achieve this is to squeeze your glutes, your bum muscles, and squeeze your abs, your six pack here, at the same time. So I'll show you what that does. If I come into a bit of a sagging position here, if I squeeze my abs and my bum, it's almost impossible to not be in the right position. So as long as I do that the whole time that I'm doing my exercises, my hips are going to stay in roughly the right position. When we're going through some of the variations, it's sometimes best to pike the hips up a little bit, just to make sure that your hips are not sagging down, because it's more often people's hips sag down than they do to come up. Next thing is elbows. So another common error I see with people doing push-ups is they have the elbows flared out wide. So I'll show you an example of this. So it usually comes hand in hand with having your hands too wide. They come out like this. I'm going to take you back to the car analogy I used earlier. If we're pushing a car, not only are my hands going to be in, if I'm pushing a car, I'm going to come behind it and push like this. I'm not going to push my elbows out here, don't get anywhere near as much power. Pushing like this, elbows tucked in, doesn't have to be right into your body. Roughly 45 degrees is what I generally tend to go with. So it's the difference between this and this. And obviously take that 45 degrees with a grain of salt, because obviously it's just where is most comfortable for you, as long as we're not ridiculously flared out. You can tuck in as much as you want. You might find it a little bit harder than what you tuck in, but generally it'll be better for your elbows, better for your power generation by tucking the elbows to about 45 degrees. Depth of the push-up. The main goal is to get our chest to touch the floor, or maybe your t-shirt rather than your chest to touch the floor is a good way of putting it. So that's basically as close as you're going to get to the floor without actually touching the floor, because you don't want to rest your chest on the floor and take all of the tension out of your muscles. So as I come down, I want to get as close to the floor as I can and back up. So literally just the t-shirt, maybe the tip of your chest touching the floor. Okay, so I'm going to go over some of the progressions of the push-up. So generally speaking, what people will start with is a kneeling push-up. If they've never done push-ups before, generally speaking, females over males, more because they just naturally have slightly less upper body strength. I see plenty of males starting with this as well. It really depends on where you're starting with. But so all I'm going to do is put something underneath my knees, something soft, so I've got a cushion here. And I come into that starting position. So feet roughly in line with, hands roughly in line with my chest, gripping the floor with my fingertips, elbows are going to come out to 45 degrees or so, tensing my abs and my glutes. I'm going to kind of come forward and down till my chest just touches the floor and back up. So notice that when I come down, I'm not coming down face first, I'm coming down chest first. So it's the difference between sort of coming straight down and coming down. We want to come down sort of forward and down at the same time. So I'll do that from the side as well. So hands in line with the chest, fingertips, elbows, tense the abs and the glutes, forward and down, back up, like so. And then that's the basic technique that we use with all of these variations. So if we wanted to progress that, we'll go to a full push-up. We'll come up onto our knees, onto our feet, like so, exactly the same. Hands, fingertips, elbows, glutes and abs, forward and down, back up, like so. So those two variations, what we're looking at is, generally speaking, this is very generally speaking because it depends on a lot of things, the push-ups on your knees you'll generally be lifting approximately 40% of your body weight. So if you weighed 100 kilos, you'll be lifting, it's kind of like bench pressing 40 kilos. The full push-up, you're looking at somewhere around 70%. So again, if you're on a bench press, you would be bench pressing about 70 kilos. Obviously, I'm not likening it to a bench press too much because there's a lot of different factors, but for a general strength guide, that's where we're looking at. Okay, so the next variation we're going to go over, which is a little bit harder than a full push-up, is a feet elevated push-up. So sometimes see this called either an incline push-up or a decline push-up. Sometimes just feet elevated. I tend to call it either feet elevated or an incline push-up. It'd be called an incline push-up because it's very similar to an incline chest press or bench press. It'd be called a decline push-up because your body's at a bit of a decline. So it's really just whatever your personal preference is. But if you're looking at a program you've gotten from someone or from like an online one, probably double check which one it is. So all I'm going to do, exactly the same as before, everything the same, fingertips, hands, elbows. This is the one where we're going to slightly pike our hips up, tense our abs and glutes, coming down, back up, down, back up, like so. So with this one, there's a greater emphasis on the core because you're trying to hold your body up higher. That's why it's slightly better to keep your hips slightly piked up rather than just in that neutral position. We've got a few ways we can progress from there. One is the archer push-up. So this is a progression on the way to a one-handed push-up if you were so inclined. I'm not going to be demonstrating that because I can't do it. But an archer push-up has a degree of variability within it as well. So all I'm going to do, so you're essentially working one arm at a time. This arm is going to be out. Preferably I would use a medicine ball rather than a foam roller. You just want something to sort of raise your arm up and to be able to put pressure into without it moving too much, so that will move but not too much. So what I'm going to do is exactly the same as before, everything the same. Down and up. So you'll notice that I'm still putting pressure down into this, so I could have this really far in and it's a lot easier, so it's a lot closer to a normal push-up. If I moved it out, I've got less scope to use these big muscles to push up. It's the difference between that and that. Like I was saying earlier, if I was pushing a car, I would have my elbows tucked in to get more power than if my arm wouldn't try and push a car like that because it just never move. So the further away it is, the straighter your arm is, the more difficult it's going to be. Then obviously if you were going through sets of these, you'd want to change arms every now and then to keep it even. Okay, another way to make each progression that I've highlighted here a little bit more difficult is to slow the eccentric part of the lift. What is the eccentric part of the lift? It is essentially the part where your body is, you're letting gravity take your body down, but by slowing it, you're fighting gravity. So you're working your muscles to fight gravity. So with a push-up, that would be the lowering part. So set yourself up, come down. It depends how slow you want to go. We can go for a count of 3. 1, 2, 3, and then fast back. So what we're doing there is increasing our time under tension, but then keeping the lifting part of the lift, the concentric, nice and fast. We could make each variation of push-up explosive. So we can go for the clap push-up, so exactly the same, like so. But on how explosive you are, you could add more into that. So on top of all of the progressions, regressions that I've highlighted and the ways that we can make them more difficult or focus on sort of eccentric strength or maybe power with the clap push-ups, we've also got variations. So one of the variations is a scapular push-up. This one's good for scapular strength and mobility, general scapular strength all around. So if you get a lot of shoulder issues, maybe you have tight shoulders, shoulder impingements, things like this, scapular push-ups are really good. So all we do, again, we can use any of those variations that we've had within this, so on your knees, feet elevated, etc., depending on how much weight you want to put through it. I would suggest starting with whatever you would start with for your normal push-up. And instead of, the way I feel best describes it is you're doing a push-up without bending your arms. So go into this position, everything else exactly the same, weight over my fingertips, hands in the same position, tense the glutes and the abs. And what I'm going to do is bring my body down without bending my arms, and then back up. So what you're actually doing is protracting and retracting your scapula, the shoulder blades, using the muscles around it, and all this does is moves it through the full range of motion and strengthens the muscles around it. If you've never done anything like this before, it might take you a few attempts to actually get it right. I know I definitely didn't get it right the first time I did it. But the best way to conceptualize it is to do a push-up, but don't bend your arms. Like so. Another complete variation of the push-up is a pike push-up. So obviously earlier on I likened press-ups to a bench press. It's very chest dominant, chest, triceps and shoulders, but chest dominant. With a pike push-up, we're changing that emphasis onto the shoulders. So instead of a bench press or a chest press, think more a strict press, shoulder press, something like that. So to perform this one, all we're going to do, start off a bit like a feet elevated push-up, then I'm going to walk my hands back. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but obviously bringing my head down straight this time. Like so. So everything else is exactly the same. I'm still tensing my abs and my glutes. Still putting my weight through my fingertips. Still tucking the elbows, coming down like so. It's worth mentioning that the more you walk your hands in, the more your hips are piked up, and the more vertical you are, the heavier it's going to be, because you're taking more of your body weight. The more you walk your hands out, the easier it's going to be. So that concludes our tutorial on press-ups. Hope you enjoyed it and I hope you get some use out of it.